Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Julian.
And I'm Madeline. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you. And you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at Sleepless Cinematic Pod.
In addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. And while we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we continue our current cycle of movies we're calling musicians turned actors, with a category we call Mise-Unseen, where the three of us watch a film that none of us have seen before and discuss our impressions and main takeaways from a first viewing.
And that film for this week is the 1976 film directed by Nicolas Roeg and starring David Bowie, The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is a film that, as has been said, the three of us are watching for the first time in preparation for this episode. But really, there are 4 of us who have watched it for the first time.
That's true.
Because we have a guest. Not only do we have a guest, we have a return guest who, if you've listened to our episode about Saltburn, you've heard her with us before. And you may also remember that she is a terrific writer, vivacious drag performer, and all-around great person to engage with about pretty much anything artsy and many, many things beyond. We've been great friends ever since we met in college almost a decade ago. And here we are now talking about movies on the record once again. Michaela Brady, welcome back to the show.
Welcome.
Woo. Hi. I'm so glad to be back. It seems to be a trend now where whenever I visit home, I get to come on this podcast. I'm glad that you guys have welcomed me back.
We're glad to have you here.
Very, very happy to have you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How have you been, by the way?
Gosh.
I know, it's been a long year.
Yeah, it's been almost a year. Yeah, definitely have made an effort to watch more films and have enjoyed listening to you guys as well. I have been ramping up the drag performances. I'm trying to put out a poetry collection, still working on novel stuff, and also got promoted within my job, which
congratulations.
not much, but it was a pretty big
that's
deal.
Wonderful.
Congrats.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. No, but you're staying busy in the arts. Been watching a lot of movies. That's going to serve quite well for this. Love to hear that. That's great.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
Julian mentioned that you are also a really big Bowie fan, which, makes you a natural fit for this particular film.
Love it.
Yeah.
But you are also watching it for the first time, just like the three of us.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say I'm a Bowie fan. I wouldn't say I'm like so diehard that I've seen every single Bowie film or anything like that. It's more that I very much enjoy his music, but there are definitely bigger Bowie fans out there than me.
Yeah. And it's, I don't like to, measure one person's fandom against the other, but
Yeah.
I do feel in a similar spot in the sense that I know a lot of his music very, very well, but with his movies, this is not the first film starring David Bowie that I've seen, but there are definitely some gaps in that knowledge that I would like to fill in time.
Yeah,
Same
same
here. Absolutely. And we are talking The Man Who Fell to Earth, which should not be confused with The Man Who Knew Too Much, an Alfred Hitchcock film that was first released in 1934 and then was remade by Hitchcock himself in 1955, starring Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day. Have you guys seen this movie?
I have.
Yeah.
I have not seen it.
I feel like this movie is like not really on par with his other 50s stuff,
Yeah.
but it's still fun. I would definitely
think
recommend
it's
it.
Definitely still a good time.
Yeah. The Man Who Knew Too Much, not to be confused with The Man Who Fell to Earth.
And given that The Man Who Fell to Earth is a film starring David Bowie, this is not to be confused with a different film that does not star Bowie, but shares a name with one of his signature songs, which is Starman.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
The John
Definitely.
Carpenter film from 1984, which instead of Bowie stars Jeff Bridges as a similar type of character. I have not seen this film yet.
good.
Admittedly,
Good one.
I've been curious ever since I first heard of it. John Carpenter, I've loved every movie of his that I've seen, but I haven't seen very many. Got to fix that. I need to see more of his
That
films.
one's definitely a trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Starman's kind of fun though.
Yeah, it's definitely fun.
I feel like it has like an emotional core that I was not ready
Yeah,
for.
I
when
feel
I
like
saw
it stands out from a lot of Carpenter's filmography in that way.
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't feel like a horror movie
It's
to
a
the same
thriller,
extent.
yeah.
A lot of his filmography. And I mean, while we're talking Starman, we also just shouldn't confuse this with the David Bowie song Starman.
Thank
Yeah.
Or
you.
the album it's off of, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust.
This is a great point.
And the spiders from Mars.
yeah, that's true.
And we shouldn't confuse with another Bowie album, The Man Who Sold the World.
Thank you. Yes.
Which I then blasted after watching this film and had a good cry to it. But don't ask me why, it just does that. But I also would say it should not be confused with another album, Lost in Space by Amy Mann,
Oh,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is
Good
one of her best albums and was the soundtrack to my 2003 childhood.
Nice.
Very
My mom was
nice.
playing it whenever she picked me up from school, and I
Oh.
always imagined like someone falling to earth whenever I was listening to it. And that's when my dad first told me about this film.
Oh,
And I
wow.
have no idea why. I think it was just the space of it all.
Definitely. I like that.
The episode before this one, we talked about a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, Licorice Pizza, and there's a in a different movie of his, Magnolia, there's a very memorable sequence that is set to an Amy Mann song, which is I could have a much better knowledge of her as an artist, but that's one of the main things I think about whenever she comes into conversation.
Main man. Absolutely. Here we go. And as long as we're talking about songs and albums, I'd throw in that this film is not to be confused with the song Down to Earth, which is by a contemporary of Bowie, whose career has some interesting parallels to him. This would be Peter Gabriel. And he wrote this song for the 2008 film Wall-E, which is another film interested in intergalactic travel and has a lot of commentary on human society. This song did not take off like other Pixar related songs.
Take off. Nice.
Exactly. Thank you. Pun intended there. It's not like a You've Got a Friend in Me, but Down to Earth. It's like a little paint by numbers, Peter Gabriel, but it's pretty good. And for about 3 weeks in 2024, this was my son's favorite song
I believe
Oh,
it.
because of the
wonderful.
association to Wall-E, which he loves. And I still ride for. Wall-E
Of course.
is
Wally's great.
incredible. Yeah.
That was one of the few end credit films I watched as I got a bit older because I loved the animations during
So
it.
good. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I knew that song because I listened to it, but you're right, it didn't kick off like
Yeah.
it should have.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yes, but bringing it back to movies for a moment, The Man Who Fell to Earth, because of a certain phrase that is uttered about the middle of the film, it should not be confused with Ad Astra.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which
I
is-
thought of that. I thought of that.
The
Yeah, yeah.
James Gray film from 2019 starring Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones, which weirdly I feel like is that I saw it at the time. I thought it was really good. I feel like that movie is not discussed enough.
No,
now.
it really
Yeah.
came and went. I mean,
Yeah.
it was also in the shadow of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
This is true.
Yeah.
That one really took all the
Mhm.
shine.
Yeah, Ad Astra, I mean, thinking about the plot of that movie, it's kind of the opposite movie of The Man Who Fell to Earth.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
I was
And
like,
who
it's
took
the
off from Earth.
Yeah.
It's the flip. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
and
Yeah.
goes on an existential journey in deeper space. It's very like Heart of Darkness type story arc.
Ooh.
But yes, this is not that film.
No, we are talking The Man Who Fell to Earth, the 1976 film from Nicolas Roeg. Okay, what in God's name is this movie about? I think we're gonna get into how
Yeah.
absolutely bonkers this film is.
Yeah.
But Madeline, you have taken on the challenge
Yes.
of trying to figure out how to explain this.
Yes. Wish me luck. So we open on a flash of light crashing into the earth from the skies above. And from the impact site, a man slipping and sliding his way down a New Mexico mountaintop. Our intergalactic friend, known as Tommy, played by David Bowie, sets off with a goal of raising seed money to hire a patent lawyer. After selling his many gold rings, he manages to hire Oliver Farnsworth, who tells him that he has enough basic patents to grow his wealth to over $300 million in the next few years. But that isn't enough for Tommy. We later learn that his home planet is suffering from a terrible drought, and he's come to Earth in order to ship water back to his home planet, thereby saving his wife and children. As Tommy works to accumulate his wealth, he strikes up a romantic relationship with a young woman named Mary Lou, who he meets while revisiting the area near his original landing. The two soon move in together, and all seems well in their blossoming relationship. However, Tommy never falters from his ultimate goal and begins to make preparations to leave Earth and Mary Lou behind. At the same time, various other entities begin to grow suspicious of Tommy and his company's quick rise to the top. So will he beat the clock? and evade the grasp of those trying to take him down.
That's such a good synopsis.
Really good.
Thank you.
A+ work.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I feel like
really had to reference the Wikipedia page plot summary a lot on this.
And I feel like when you hear that out of context, it can sound, if you don't know the vibe of this movie, it really can sound like a different type of
It
thing.
sounds
That's very
much
true.
plottier when you just lay it all out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Well, plottier than how the movie feels when it lands.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't
Nice
think that
one.
movie, yeah.
Oh, that's 2 for 2.
Thank you, yeah.
You're on a roll with the puns. Yeah, and this is a movie that stretches out over around 2 hours and 20 minutes. So that, that plot, I mean, as you just described it, Madeline, it's very succinct there. But when you stretch it out over that much time, there's a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Apparently, this movie was cut 20 minutes shorter on its initial American release. Did you guys hear this?
I heard it too. I heard rumblings that it even was rated X at one point, which I would believe.
In England,
Yeah.
I believe.
I would
believe
believe
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of genitals.
Yeah. Well, this is our first time, all 4 of us, coming to this film. Michaela, what did you know about this movie before you saw it? And do you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I knew about this film from my dad mentioning it.
When you were like 8.
When I was very little.
Right.
He was just like, oh man, it was so good.
Lost in Space, yeah.
And that's mostly what I heard. My parents never were like, and you should watch it because of the nudity and everything. So like, it was never a like, come on, let's go watch it now. But I just remember my dad saying like, oh, it was a very good David Bowie film. The music's so cool. It's very trippy. And so then when Julian was like, do you want to be on the Man Who Fell to Earth episode? I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to. And I'd love to watch it with my dad. Which in hindsight, I was like, oh, it got a bit explicit at times. Like we still had a good time watching it and a good discussion, but it was like, this isn't quite a family film. I thought this was going to be like a cool art house film without all of the sex in it.
Yeah.
But
It's full of sex.
yeah, I should have seen that coming when I saw 1976. But at the same time, it was very interesting to watch, especially like later in life. I was like very into David Bowie's music, kind of via my friend who got obsessed with him in high school. And I was like, oh, wow. Changes was a great song, but everything else is also amazing. And then I moved to the UK for a year abroad in 2015 into 2016. And as we all know, David Bowie died in 2016.
Right.
And in January. So I had just gotten back from Christmas break and I was, back in Oxford, very stressed because that's the nature of being there. Alan Rickman had just died and I had previously worked with him like just before he died on a like short YouTube video to raise money for refugee charities. And so I was already feeling like a bit emotional about all of that because no one knew Alan Rickman was going to die, but a lot of people knew David Bowie wasn't well. So then I think it was within days of each other, was the same week David Bowie died. And it was this cloudy English day. I was telling our friend earlier, like January and February in the UK are just miserable.
I was going to say, like,
the days
cloudy
are short
days. Yeah.
and gray. Yeah, it's miserable. And
Yeah.
so you're stressed at university. You're already a bit like on edge. And then you hear David Bowie's died. And it was like this like collective grieving, like even among like these young students at Oxford. Like I had a lot of very artsy friends who just like shut themselves in their room and had like David Bowie listening parties. And I remember texting one being like, could I come? And they're like, no, this is just for me. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When I said I'm having a listening party, yeah, I didn't mean it was a social. And it felt like this sort of grieving. It felt like art had died in a very dramatic like way to put it, but it felt like all the color was actually drained from people, from life for a hot second.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how else to describe it, but I think being in the UK after Bowie's death was, I would hope that a similar mourning was felt here because he was like in America. I mean, this film takes place in America, but like, I think if I had been in London especially, it would have been even more like present.
Sure.
So it was interesting because then unfortunately it's the phenomenon of when someone dies, you then look back at everything they'd done. And that's when I started to like get more into Bowie because I realized like I hadn't maybe paid as much attention or respect as I did in my lifetime. I mean, that's not entirely true, but I think I was like, I want to go beyond the hits and the things that are easy to listen to. I want to listen to the everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, and being in the UK, it was also very easy to do that because everyone was mourning. So you'd go to a record store, Bowie was playing all day, like that kind of thing. Yeah. So then the art and the creativity came back, but it did feel like this kind of blow to the UK creative scene.
Wow. Alan Rickman too, just like a 1-2 punch of British entertainment icons just no longer with us. Wow.
And that was at the beginning of the year when we also lost people like Prince, Leonard Cohen and Carrie Fisher too.
Yeah.
I was on a tour when Prince died, and we were all in the car, and we were like, oh, no.
Yeah.
That's a very
I've never heard you
memorable
make
moment.
that noise before.
There we go. I made it when Prince died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole van of guys did.
Yeah, 2016 was, I mean, I think, this is not to, take this away from other years where it's also true, but that there were some really very notable celebrity deaths that year.
Totally.
Experiencing that same phenomenon in America at the time. I mean, I don't think that I saw exactly the same sort of direct engagement with the zeitgeist that you did, Michaela, but I think that it was a very felt loss here too.
Yeah.
I actually remembered I was on a school break at the time. It was my freshman year at our alma mater, Sarah Lawrence. But I just remember mainly via social media seeing a lot of tributes pour out. And something that I personally experienced that I remember talking to a lot of people at the time, and they had this too, was that when the announcement came out that David Bowie had died, they didn't believe it at first. They thought it was like is this like part of his next persona or something like that?
Yeah.
Because the Black Star album had just come out.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yep.
Like days before. And so everyone, just given his reputation and the arc of his career, I think everyone wanted to believe that. But then a few hours later, it was like, no, it's sadly true.
David Bowie's death hit Dougie particularly hard. We weren't together yet, but he's mentioned this. I think Dougie is a huge Bowie fan, and he's very much like identified with Bowie through a lot of his life. And David Bowie's death came like 2 days before Dougie's birthday, which is also a few days
after mine,
after
yeah.
your birthday, Julian. So that was I think really, really tough for him. He talks about that of like kind of the person he's idolized his entire life, like dying like 2 days before your birthday.
Yeah.
It was really, really challenging. So he had seen this movie before because he's a huge Bowie fan. I mentioned this, I think, on or off mic, I can't remember, that we have this poster on our fridge, even though I had not seen this movie. And I asked Dougie this morning, like, wait, where did we get this? And he said he found a book of movie posters on the street and looked through and found this one and tore it out and then left the rest of the book on the street for somebody else to find. He was like, I'm not going to be greedy and take all these posters.
I'm going to take the one that means something to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this has been on our fridge. So I've known the movie poster for this for quite some time, but had not a whole lot of knowledge about what the actual movie would be about other than I assumed an alien. Yeah. And I had seen Starman, and I think that I had known that there were, somewhat similar plots in some ways between the two.
Yeah, I had heard of this movie long before finally seeing it now. I think I first heard of it about 10 years ago. The first place I remember seeing it is in this encyclopedia that I still have at my parents' place called 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. It's been reprinted in many editions. I think it keeps on rolling. But that was one of those 1001 movies. And I think like I first turned to that page a few years after I became a Bowie fan. I first got into him in like 8th grade, and I was hooked pretty much instantly. But then, at that point, I felt I was coming more into my own as a cinephile. And I was like, oh, David Bowie movie that I haven't heard about? Sounds cool. I didn't get to watching it until about a decade later. But in that time, following his tragic passing in 2016, I think, well, Michaela, you talked about having like a change in direction in what aspects of his discography that you searched for then. And I kind of had that too, because around that time, that was when, like, previously I had listened a lot to like Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, a lot of those earlier albums. But around that point, that was when I got more into like the Berlin trilogy, which is made closer in time to this film. So it feels, and actually there are still images from the making of this film that were used for the album covers of both Station to Station and then Low 1 year later. So this movie is very connected to that era of David Bowie.
Totally.
Very cool.
Emilio, how about you? What was your knowledge of this film?
We're on a relative hot streak on this podcast of covering films that I have come in brick cold on. I knew almost nothing about this movie besides the fact that Bowie was in it. I knew that Nicolas Roeg was the director. I also knew that it was a book previously, but that was it. I thought Hester Street, which was our last Mise-Unseen, was a hard late night watch. The Man Who Fell to Earth was like, hold my beer or like hold my gin and tonic. If you are not locked the fuck in on this movie, you are up the creek without a paddle.
Yeah,
like,
you cannot look away for a second.
Exactly. I felt like I was watching like 5 or 6 different movies at once. It's very surreal. There's like a lot of double exposures. There's a lot of cross-cutting. There's so much sex in this movie. Was not enough to reel me back in, gotta say. Like, it just left me more confused.
Yeah, totally.
So I pulled a Hester Street and I rallied last night, a little bit this morning, made it through a second viewing. So important.
Very essential.
Yeah.
We all kind of, before we got on mics, mentioned how crucial it felt, at least for us, to like get another crack at this movie. It made a lot more sense. I felt like it got a lot more interesting. I gotta say, I don't know if I'm ever gonna see this movie again, but I'm excited to talk about it now.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that I didn't know that Nicolas Roeg directed this.
Yeah.
Until I started watching it. And that I was like, okay, now the sex makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think the only other Nicolas Roeg movie that I've seen is Don't Look Now, which I think we mentioned long ago, has like, I think one of the most realistic and like best filmed sex scenes in movies ever. So these are different, but still I feel like you can see
there's
stylistically
I don't want to
some similarities.
I don't want to drag this conversation into the gutter, but like I want to have a moment where we talk about the sex scenes in this. Because to your point, I think Nicolas Roeg is really interested in portraying sex in a very different way.
Totally.
And we'll get into this later, but
yeah. And this was my first rodeo with Nicolas Roeg, or I guess my first Rogio.
There we go.
God damn it.
I live to do this. But so I mean, I know of his other, like, often considered his classic films of the 1970s, Don't Look Now, as you mentioned, along with Walkabout before that, and then his first directorial effort, Performance, which is worth mentioning in this conversation because that's another film that stars a musician, Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
And so I've known about the legendary status of these Nicolas Roeg films for a long time, but this was the first one I've actually seen. And I think it's been established previously on this podcast that, Madeline, you said this as early as our first episode, that I like a big swing.
Yeah.
Which is still true, and I, we'll get a little deeper into it. I do really like this movie. I think it's a really interesting thing, but part of the price of admission of opening yourself up to big swings is that you have to be ready to not get it the first time. I also got that second viewing in, and I agree that it helps a lot with this film. But Michaela, I think you said you only managed to squeeze in one viewing of this.
Yes.
It's over 2 hours.
It's a commitment. I felt every second of the 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Dragged a little bit.
Yeah,
particularly I think in the last like third of it, you're kind of like, okay, well, what else?
What's going on here? Yeah.
But I think that this can be said about a lot of movies of that time.
Yeah.
A lot, that kind of like pre-Star Wars era of New Hollywood, where like some other movies that I think of that left me feeling similarly the first time. I mean, for one thing, a lot of Robert Altman movies.
Yeah, I think I always need a rewatch with Altman.
Same.
Because of how much like dialogue intersects and how much like improv there is. It never really feels like my brain can comprehend what's happening on first watch.
Yeah, so whether it be Nashville, which we've discussed before, or The Long Goodbye, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, or anything before, after, or in between, Altman, I feel like, is always one of those names. Another movie, though, that we have discussed before that I feel very similarly about is Shampoo. I think that movie, like the first time watching it, I was kind of like, I'm not really sure how to like sink into this. I'm not really sure like what getting in the zone feels like for this movie. But then when I've thought about it more in retrospect, like, that movie's up to some interesting stuff.
I feel the exact same way about that movie.
Yeah.
It's complicated in really fun ways. And I am like on the fence about it some days. And other days I'm like, that's a great movie.
I think a lot of critics are too.
Yeah.
I felt that way. I was just making sure I got the name right of A Bout de Souffle, the Jean-Luc Godard film.
Which one?
Breathless.
Oh, Breathless.
Oh, yeah.
You said the French name first. Yeah.
In a bad French accent, I have to add. But I watched it in school, in like high school. I was like, oh, new wave. That's great. And then I rewatched it and I was like, all right, I get it a bit more. I can't say I enjoy it anymore, but like I get it more.
Yeah.
I feel the way about anything that drifts into like art house or new wave, where there's a lot more that's abstract and a lot more like in the negative space, with maybe a lot of stuff in the foreground that's very cluttered, and you have to like sift through it all to find like what they're trying to say, if they're even trying to say anything. Yeah, it feels like looking at like a dollhouse with a bunch of different moving parts, and you're just gonna have to keep like revisiting it and looking at it in all these different ways. And Czech New Wave is like that too.
Mhm.
Totally.
Some David Lynch films are like that.
Yeah.
Some, I think all kind of all of them.
Another Rest in
Straight
Peace.
Story is
Oh,
very...
okay. The straight story is it's in the name, but
Maybe like Elephant Man too, I feel.
Elephant Man is pretty accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's accessible, but it's a little more Lynchian still.
I'm not going to rewatch Rabbits, but I know it needs a rewatch.
Yes, for those willing to sign up for that. Yeah, you've heard us mention a few of these titles now. Listeners, if you have any others that we didn't mention that you want to add to the mix, we'll put a little poll in our episode description and also on our Instagram where you can submit movies that you didn't get the first time but knew you had to come back to.
I love that. That sounds really cool.
Totally. I think a few weeks ago we talked Possession.
Exactly.
Which we said the exact same thing, talking Possession.
And in said episode, there was also, because this came up much earlier in the run of our podcast too, another movie like that is Punch Drunk Love.
Definitely. I think that
Yeah.
would probably be my nostalgic pick for
Yeah.
this. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and less nostalgic in the greater film canon and more in your life.
In
right?
my
Yeah.
personal movie going experience life. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Paul Thomas Anderson, we mentioned that in our Inherent Vice episode, which I think also fits the bill.
Yeah.
But I think, by virtue of the fact that we're talking about all this, I certainly like when that happens with a movie. I'm intrigued when there's a certain kind of not getting it the first time
Yeah.
that really pulls you in.
Totally. Yeah. Listeners, we'd love to hear from you about this. You can also
Yes.
send us an email at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com.
One last one I'd like to add that
Yeah.
I'd forgotten was The End, which was that apocalypse musical film that came
Oh,
out this
yeah.
year. So I saw a preview screening of it at Riverside Studios in London with George McKay, there for a Q&A, which was also quite cool to then kind of, without having to watch the film again, have some questions answered by one of the actors in it.
Yeah.
But that was one where you're kind of getting it throughout. The tonal shifts are quite drastic at points, but then the ending is a little bit more vague. And so I was leaving it thinking, did I get that? And it is one I'd like to rewatch. But I did enjoy that George McKay was there I asked him a question about how he interprets the ending, basically, and spoiled it for myself. But yeah, that's a more recent one that I think is worth at least a couple watches.
Mhm.
It's not like The Matrix where you go back and find something new every single time.
Yeah, that I know of that movie. I missed it when it was in theaters in the U.S., but I was curious about that.
Yeah.
And that actor you mentioned too, he was one of the two soldiers in 1917.
Yes.
And so we've been saying a lot about, many films, The Man Who Fell to Earth being one of them, that are tricky to process, at least on the first viewing. But there are also some things, and I think that Madeline's premise description justifies this, that there are some things about The Man Who Fell to Earth which, if you try to describe them, are actually surprisingly straightforward. Maybe arguably, but still. So I'll put it to the group now. What aspects of the film did you find easier to interpret, but what aspects did you also find more confounding?
I just feel like the film really takes its sweet time actually explaining what's happening, and occasionally it'll do more like showing than telling, and that's all fine. I think that's all effective. But because of that, I think it does take you a little bit to grasp exactly what is happening. What are his motivations? Why is he here? Why does he need so much money?
Yeah.
You can kind of make assumptions early on, but it doesn't really solidify anything for you for a while.
Definitely. And I think the fact that it took so long for me to understand what the motivations were for Bowie's character made the first, hour and a half of the film very nebulous in a way that it didn't really work on me. I gotta say. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that are going on, but that was a harder thing to interpret. I think the thing for me that felt kind of easy to interpret, I felt like the movie was trying to make early comparisons to Bryce and Thomas Newton, the David Bowie character, and how they kind of crisscross, where it's like the Bryce character starts as this Lothario that finds direction in his life, where Bowie's character is the opposite, starts with all this direction and kind of ends in this place where he's it's just all human vice. Yeah. I felt like that was telegraphed right away. So.
I was thinking they were signaling Bryce as a villain, and then I was kind of oh, he's not a villain. He's
just some guy.
He's a guy that
Yeah.
for towards the end of the film takes an interest in trying to help Newton and that kind of thing. My dad was like, oh, well, no, Bryce is still a bad guy because he ratted Newton out about being like an alien. And I was like, I don't know.
Like, we don't necessarily see that happen.
Yeah. And also, like, I think that there was already so much paranoia about the company anyway that and if he's trying to claim I'm an alien and he's trying to like actually be upfront about his mission, that now he's just being tested and prodded because they think he's crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Bryce had any role in that. In fact, I think he and Mary Lou, it seems like they had a sort of pact of trying to stay quiet and far away. And then they decide to intervene and get back into his life.
Yeah, I think that the things with like Bryce's hidden x-ray camera and stuff like that, I think is just so that because he's had the suspicion for so long, he needs it to be confirmed so that he doesn't think he's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think he's then gonna like sell the pictures to the government or whatever.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think when I was watching it, I was like leaning more the direction of like, oh, Bryce is a bad guy, just because of the career steps that he takes and the place that he's in at the end of the movie, as opposed to the place where Tommy is. But yeah, I like that take on his character.
Yeah, I mean, on my rewatch with Dougie, he was also pointing out, like, you've got several scenes that's got something going on with Tommy and something going on with Bryce, like intercut, where you're going back and forth between the two. And I'm like, what is happening? And Dougie's like, they're psychically connected. I'm like, what? I don't. But on my rewatch, I'm like, yeah. I mean, you get this a couple of times where they do feel like kind of emotionally on parallel paths, and then as you said, from like their kind of character arcs, they kind of switch places.
Right.
But there are these certain scenes where it seems like there is some sort of like unspoken connection between them, even from far apart. Is very I did not pick up on it until Dougie said something.
I mean, this film is adapted from a novel, and when I think about science fiction literature of about that time, especially when I think of books or stories that have characters that don't seem to have any relevance to each other at first but turn out to later, I thought immediately of the Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle.
I love Cat's Cradle.
That's an awesome book.
Yeah.
I read it in high school. Really made an impression on me.
Mm-hmm.
But that is another story from around that same time. The book was, I think, released 10 years before the movie. So it's even closer in time with that. That has like these characters that seem to have pretty much nothing to do with each other at first, but you kind of just trust the author, like, okay, these are here, there must be purpose, which eventually reveals itself.
That's the one with Ice Nine?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's actually an interesting point that my dad made last night. He was a bit disappointed with the ending, and he was like, I thought something else was going to happen. I don't remember it being like that. And I was like, oh, well, some of these art house films do just have these like empty endings because it's sort of a statement of life as is. My dad, and I was like, just leave it as like a product of the genre. My dad's like, no, they invested money and time into this and made 2 hours of movie. There's a reason why everything happened. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like, I can't just hand wave it away as, oh, it's just the genre. Like there are reasons why these things happen. It's just that it might not be immediately apparent. I'd say a nice, obvious, a more explicit thing for me was the exhibition of his powers. So I loved the freaking sequence where they're driving in Pennsylvania and you just hear like bluegrass music.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
all of a sudden.
I was like, what is happening?
So it cuts to people, I guess like settlers around, I don't know, probably early 1800s.
Yeah.
Yo.
And then it's like got this sort of yellow, like gold vignette around the screen. And they can see the car, and he can see them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of
but
like
she can't see them.
But she can't see anything. And so it's like he can create this sort of portal to the past. This is never brought up again.
Exactly.
But it was amazing. And then there was like when he, I guess, has a vision of the drought on his planet and his glasses go dark and he kind of goes into like this stupor. And then, just anytime that you realize he's an alien, anytime you remember he does have powers, but then he does kind of normalize himself. He's like, we probably would have done the same to you if you'd come see us. He says like, I'm nothing special. I'm not even a scientist. Like I'm just trying to make sure my family doesn't die. Like he's just kind of a normal person, a normal being on his planet. And but to us, he's still extraordinary. And I like when the film does those little bizarre moments just as kind of, I don't know, reminders that he's an alien. And I found it interesting when Mary Lou is like, you're an alien, but don't go back. She meant foreigner.
Yeah, she meant like
you're
love that.
British.
That's
immigrant.
like
You're
the biggest-
British.
It's the biggest laugh I think I had in the whole movie.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I was like, does she know? And then it's only when he does the eye thing that you realize she like didn't know until then. But like when she's like, you're an alien and it's fine. I was like, when did they find out?
yeah, that was a good one. Yo,
Yeah.
that scene of the settlers set me back like an hour in this movie.
because you're like,
Straight up.
how is this
Yeah.
led up to?
Straight
When is
up.
it coming
You know what that
back?
kind of-
Straight up like screwed me up hard.
That, you know what that kind of made me think of? Even though it's a bigger swing in this movie, it made me think a little bit of the flashbacks in Medium Cool. That
yeah. Like of the kid's dad.
Yeah, Harold.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Harold is remembering his father, I think it's in West Virginia.
Mhm.
So it felt like, I mean, it's a little tonally jarring in that movie too, but it's easier to figure out how that's connected.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That,
in that
that
film.
seems
Yeah.
relevant
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
film.
It's like
Yeah.
you're trying to create backstory for the kid. There is literally no backstory to this. It is like this strange. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And-
one of those details.
And
that,
they've all seen it. Like all
Yeah.
of these like settlers or farmers, they all saw it. We see all of their reactions.
Yeah.
So what happens to them?
Butterfly
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
The timeline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
well, exactly.
Like this is a good setup for one of the aspects of the movie that I found confounding on the first watch, which is just kind of the way that the scenes change. I think
Yeah.
a lot of really big changes happen in a very nonchalant way in this
Mm.
movie. I mean, and there's another aspect of the film that I don't think has really come up yet, but there are some really significant time lapses that
Dude,
occur.
big time. Thank
Yeah.
Big
Oh
time.
my
Huge,
god,
yeah.
yeah.
Big
I have feelings
time.
about this.
you.
Yeah. And so it's, I mean, on rewatch, it was easier for me to pinpoint when some of those happen. Like that first scene that you see with Newton and his whole rack of TVs in his living room in the apartment that he's moved into with Candy Clark's character,
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou. That's the first moment I noticed the time lapse, where it springs significantly forward from the scene that comes before that. But also like later on, at the point when there's a scene where Rip Torn's character, Nathan Bryce, is on a phone call with the company World Enterprises that Thomas Jerome Newton has founded and is CEO of. And he's saying, like, I don't really know how long I've been working here.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was
Yeah.
another moment when the time jumps forward from what happens in the scene before that. And there's a few more that we'll probably bring up. Like the first watch, honestly, I think I kind of missed a lot of those
I definitely did.
time
yeah.
lapses, but
Yeah.
it's easier to notice them by the way the characters are made up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether it be their hair color or just other aspects of their makeup, maybe most saliently at first with the Rip Torn character and with Buck Henry's character.
Buck Henry for sure.
Farnsworth.
They
Yeah.
recede his hairline further and further back.
Yeah.
In
And
the
they lighten
weirdest
it.
way.
And they
Lighten
lighten
it.
it. He's like going grayer. He is the one that is aging the quickest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one that made it so obvious to me. And then the second, more obvious sign of time was the growth of the corporation. So World
Mhm.
Enterprises is like in Manhattan. And then all of a sudden it owns gas stations and is doing a rocket launch. And I'm like,
Yeah.
we're full on Amazon mode now.
Yeah.
We're the by and large of this universe. Like,
Totally.
Yeah.
let's
I
go.
love that you just mentioned by and large.
Yeah.
But it's, but these big changes happen without any fanfare.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
yeah.
Nicolas Roeg said that he explicitly did not want references to the exact amount of time that's passed. And he was really careful about
Yeah.
that on the cutting room floor and actually found a line where somebody says something like, oh, it's been 3 months. I've been here 3 months or something. And he cut that because he didn't want it to be specific.
Like he
At any
wants
point.
that disorientation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what he was
Yeah.
going for.
It sounds in keeping, honestly, with his films. Like
Yeah.
they're very impressionistic. It's a choice. It's a way to make a movie, and it's a
Yeah.
way he made this movie.
it reminded me a bit of Synecdoche, New York, where the horror of that
Oh.
film is you lose track of time.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great comp.
Because
Yeah.
Charlie Kaufman said, I believe in an interview, that his idea of a horror film is that you lose track of time.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's why Synecdoche, New York isn't like a drama, it's a horror movie. When I watched it, I definitely felt like it was more of a drama, but when you see it from that perspective, you're like, yeah, I actually don't know when the time is jumping, other than Caden's hair and overall look is older and the other people around him are older. And I wonder if Kaufman got some inspiration from this film.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've mentioned it on the pod yet. I first saw that movie, Synecdoche, New York, in a high school English class. What an English class it was.
Oh,
There we go.
God.
Yeah. I mean, we were all of age. I was 17 at the time. It's an R-rated movie, but still. Yeah. Part of why The Man Who Fell to Earth may feel a little inaccessible to modern viewers is that it has this tone that I don't think you see in a lot of contemporary movies, even things that are arguably influenced by it. The way that Nicolas Roeg goes about these scene changes or these big shifts in the plot, I feel like that is it's a bold stylistic choice, one that I personally like. But I think that that's the kind of thing that, when you're considering how marketable a movie is, a lot of people would shy away from.
Yeah.
But I think, the first point when I noticed it is very early on in the movie when Thomas Jerome Newton just goes from scrounging up cash to having all these patents to suddenly being a CEO in the first 3 sequences.
Yeah.
And the Farnsworth character even says, he's like,
Yeah.
it happened overnight.
Yeah.
And I know he's talking about something that he felt himself personally.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
when you're watching this movie, you don't really know what's happening. You're like, oh, wait, this all happened overnight?
Yeah.
Like, you're
Yeah.
like, how much time really passed here?
And also thinking about this as an example of sci-fi in its time. So this comes out in 1976, which is 1 year before both Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That's a good point.
3 years before Alien, too, which is another story, about aliens and also about the corporate greed of humans,
Yeah.
but just takes a very different, I think, really, really, we've talked about that before, really genius spin on it, but makes it much more of a conventionally accessible film.
And I think that's actually one of the genius things about Alien. A lot of sci-fi before movies like Star Wars were not necessarily action adventures. They were usually Trojan horse style films that were commentaries on how we are living our lives as humans. And there's a lot of allegory, I think, in a lot of sci-fi films that preceded Star Wars, but that Alien seems to get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah. Oh, very, best of both worlds. Nice. But and it's and you're thinking of movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, of course, but then like
Soylent Green is
Soylent
another one.
Green, Solaris.
Yep.
When you're thinking about all of these films, these sci-fi films, a lot of which are talking about aliens, I also I think one of the things that I found kind of disorienting in this is the shots to his home planet.
Yeah.
But also you get shots to his home planet where it's mostly his wife and children just slowly dying.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is very upsetting. But then you also get these kind of acrobatic aliens spinning through the air,
Slime.
covered in a milky slime.
Yeah. We're going to get into that, right?
That's
Or maybe this
sex
is the
scene
time to
talk.
get into it. Yeah. Sex scene talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have any answers to it. I just raised a question of how did they make that? That was more of my question. I actually know what they're trying to say there. It's memories of how he
Used to be amorous.
procreated with his wife, but then I just wanted to know, is it milk? Is it goo? Is it a new black? I'm just so curious. And what do these poor actors have to do?
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
if you're going to talk about milk, I'm guessing, Michaela, I know you're not much of a horror person, so I'm guessing you haven't seen the Alien movies.
No, I haven't.
But
They're very milky.
Milky liquids are a thing in those movies. So I wonder if there's a possible, this very appropriate use of the term, a possible shared universe here. Well, we've said a bunch of comparisons already. Let's officially make it our comparison corner now. Does anyone have other comparisons that jumped out to you while watching The Man Who Fell to Earth?
A very minor one is Dune.
Okay.
Solely because the suits they're wearing look like still suits, but with an exoskeleton of water being pumped throughout the body rather than, I guess, endoskeleton. It's in the suit, in the still suits, but these had tubes on the outside.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I guess the conservationist message, which we'll kind of get into a bit later, but that reminded me a lot of Dune.
Yeah, definitely. With both of these planets are struggling with no access to water. So
Yeah. And that Dune, that's also the novels published around the same time as the book of The Man Who Fell to Earth. This occurred for me in the last few years with the release of the Villeneuve Dune movies, that like if you know that book and its place in the zeitgeist, you can see the influence is everywhere in sci-fi that follows it, whether it be this more kind of ponderous existential brand of sci-fi that's pre-Star Wars, or even in Star Wars itself. I mean, there's a giant worm in The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah. Or even in SpongeBob with the Alaskan bullworm.
Yeah.
You can't see the face that Michaela is making right now, but I wish you could, listeners. But also, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, Michaela, you made a comparison to Jean-Luc Godard before. And I actually was thinking of a different film of his while watching The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is Alphaville.
I'm not familiar with Alphaville.
Alphaville was released in 1965, and it is a Godard sci-fi movie. But because it's the French New Wave, as you can imagine, they didn't really have a budget for special effects or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's filmed in a lot of very modest spaces, but they're just saying that they're on a different world and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of where I thought of the comparison, is that you can see. So Nicolas Roeg, it should be mentioned, he, before becoming a director, was a cinematographer.
You can tell.
You can tell watching this.
Yeah.
But I think that there was still, like, as much as the images are really stunning to look at, you can tell that there were pretty modest means of production in making this movie. And so that's part of where I thought of the comparison to Alphaville, but also that there's this sense in that film too of really like big things changing, but happening very, like, almost inconspicuously visually. You just you really do have to suspend disbelief with that story, though I think that that's a really interesting film to watch.
Sweet. How about you, Madeline? Anything?
I mean, really, the first time we see his planet before the drought, and the grass is very green, and he and his family seem to be kind of frolicking. They just look like the Teletubbies.
I literally wrote that in my
too.
notes.
Yeah.
My dad said, he's like, oh, cool, Teletubbies, the pink Teletubby.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that the first glimpse of that you get is after the scene where Mary Lou takes Tommy to church, which is a funny scene to watch too. Talking about musicians turned actors.
I was going to say, he
the
does
only
his singing.
we get.
And it's not good.
And it's intentionally bad.
Yeah, but I mean, a guy like Bowie, he can sing bad at will.
Yeah.
So that he's, that's not just how he normally sings, but
And they sing the most English song
yeah.
ever.
But I like that, like with a lot of times in this movie, someone will reference something English to him, and because he's not actually from England, he doesn't know it. And I like how that's the kind of point of the hymn, is that he's like kind of mumbling and very confused.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're English, especially in the 70s, you know Jerusalem.
Yeah. I know of the existence of that song because of Monty Python.
Yeah.
Because of course I do.
Yeah.
I mean, Emilio, you haven't mentioned any comparisons yet. Do you want to jump in?
I'm going to shoot out a couple really quick ones that jumped out to me. These are two Bradley Cooper movies. This movie reminded me a lot of Limitless, which I kind of ride for.
I have not seen it.
Limitless is just like a great, fun movie to watch. And then Nightmare Alley, because they're both movies that have this very similar arc about like a rise to prominence, but there's like a sense of something not really stable about what they're building, and that it's a house of cards that's like ready to fall based on the main character's insecurity. And the last thing I just want to say is I'm going to make a book comp, which I'm probably not going to do very much ever, but this reminded me so much of Mark Twain's The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. It is also about a guy who is from the future. He ends up in medieval England. I guess we just talked about England a bit here. In that book, he uses his knowledge of modern times to like rise to power and challenge the existing power structures. And these works both have a lot, I think, of social commentary in them. And they're about like this kind of stranger in a strange land, like shaking things up. I ride for that book and Limitless. Both quite good. So
as this isn't a comp, but how Family Guy was a big deal in like the early mid 2000s, and I watched enough of it that every now and then little like references still pop into my head. And when I started seeing all of the like World Enterprises references, it just reminded me of like a cutaway they did about like 70s and 80s sci-fi films where they keep like referring to the corporation in like this very abstract term, and it's very dramatic, and then it like someone's face falls off and then it just zooms out in the desert very slowly, and I was like, this film better not be one of those. And
bad news.
It was a little bit, but not like that camp. It wasn't that level of camp, but when I just kept seeing all the corporation stuff, I was like, oh no, is this going to be one of those, like, the corporation did everything evil? And I was actually quite happy to see that they added a lot of substance to what that was and why he was doing it. So it would have been a comp if it were relevant, but it made me think of it.
No, sure. I mean, yep, there is a big baddie in this one, though, eventually.
Yeah.
Just a different corporation. And
government.
But then segueing from that, I mean, I mentioned that, like, there's not a lot of contemporary films that have a tone like this one, but something, it's, you know, not totally contemporary. It's almost 20 years old, but one movie that's much more recent that, like, watching The Man Who Fell to Earth, I kept feeling like I know I've experienced this tone somewhere before, but I couldn't place it. But then the closest thing I can get, I think this might have been what I was thinking of, is David Lynch's final feature, Inland Empire, which is another movie, while it has some very different kinds of imagery in it, is also about a character kind of floating from scene to scene with, like, the changes. There's not really any fanfare. They just kind of happen. They're just dropped on you.
Yeah. And you do get this character is kind of moving through different realities.
Yeah.
And then you've got the rabbits, you know, kind of juxtaposed in a similar way to maybe like the aliens, like planet stuff is. I definitely see what you mean.
Yeah. And that's another movie that, like, the first time you watch it, you can't try to understand it. You just have to go along for the ride.
Yeah. That's one you definitely need to rewatch if you want to absorb anything.
Yeah.
very cool. This has been Comparison Corner, guys.
It sure has.
Love these entrants. They're quite good.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the last time that we talked Licorice Pizza. Very different movie. And, you know, Licorice Pizza, the character of Alana Kane was specifically written with Alana Haim in mind. But the character of Tommy in this film has its roots in the novel. And director Nicolas Roeg said he had several different people in mind for the character before coming to Bowie, including Michael Crichton and Peter O'Toole. Despite this, Tommy feels like a character that is tailor-made for Bowie. So what do you guys think it is about Tommy that makes him such a great fit for Bowie's film debut?
I think Bowie probably made a lot of it his own.
Yeah.
That's what I suspect. I think setting it in America, Bowie being English, but I think Bowie probably took a lot of, like, his already sort of alien depiction, his already, like, kind of experimental and, like, just very creative approach to art in general. It's like the whole thing is Tommy's behavior isn't actually that bizarre. It's just little mannerisms and embracing the weirdness of it all. But he himself is not, what's that Robin Williams show where, like, he's an alien?
Mork and Mindy.
He's not wacky.
Yeah.
He's just kind of there on a mission, and he assimilates incredibly well. But there's always that kind of oddness about him, and I think that's why he fits the character. But if we're going about, like, what is about Tommy that makes it a good fit for Bowie, I think it's also that sort of earnestness.
Yeah.
He's a bit, like, soft-spoken. He's on a mission. When he falls into more, like, debauchery, when he falls into the kind of whims and wiles of American success, you know, you could see, like, a man who is also, like, Bowie was relatively young in this film, like, he was not even 30 yet, and someone falling into, like, that alcoholism with that level of success. Like, I think a young man fit for that reason as well. But yeah, again, like, there's always this sort of alien look about him, not least, you know, the hair and, like, the two different irises, like, that all sort of plays into him being an alien.
Yeah, you know, he had spent, you know, several years creating this persona of kind of an otherworldly presence. So it feels really natural for him to step into this alien kind of role.
Yeah.
Because it does, as you said, you know, Tommy is not necessarily coming in written in a way that he's wacky, he is hostile or anything. Like, he really is just, he's there. I actually think that Bowie plays him pretty subtly in a lot of ways, because I do think it feels so natural for him.
Yeah, I think my favorite moments of his performance when it comes to, like, the craft of his acting are in that scene when he has invited Bryce inside the space probe.
That's mine too, like, by a long shot.
Yeah.
I think
God,
that's his best.
Like,
his best acting.
Like when there's that line he delivers that's something like, I don't know why you would be suspicious. And he just, like, the way his face changes when he says the word suspicious.
Yeah.
Because Bryce suggests that maybe this is some kind of a weapon that he's building, and it's not. But then he realizes he could be suspicious that I'm an alien.
In that same scene, he looks like he's on the verge of tears in this very like broken way where it's like, this is my last shot. Like you could just see it. And oh my God, it killed me.
Yeah.
I also love that moment too, because I think that conversation ends with him being like, do you trust me? And he's like, not really. And he goes, well, I need you to trust me. It's like, well, I want to trust you. And they kind of have this uneasy, like, gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
I would say that is a moment where Bowie is very much Rip Torn's equal as an actor. Like, it feels very effective.
And before going into this movie, I didn't really know who the cast was beside from Bowie. And Bowie and Rip Torn are like two of the last people I would have thought to put together in a movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another moment in the performance that I really like, I also think just has some great dialogue too, is that after Tommy has revealed his alien nature to Mary Lou, there's like this scene where he's staring out, he's on the dock outside of their house and just staring out at the water, which also, I think that's the moment where the still image on the cover of the Low album comes from.
Interesting.
Based on like the coat that Bowie's wearing and the way that his face looks. But then there's something that Mary Lou says something about being worried that he would hate her or something like that. And he's like, I don't hate you. I don't hate anyone. I can't.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like, is a very indicative character moment for Tommy as well.
Yeah.
And when you consider that and like how the greater arc of the movie plays out, I think it explains a lot, especially towards the end when a lot of really negative things come his way. He doesn't exactly retaliate.
Yeah, or he doesn't really fight it.
Yeah. I mean, he's clearly not pleased with the situation he's been put in. But yeah, as you said, he doesn't really fight it.
But even, in the scene when his contacts end up getting stuck on his eyes, he's not really asserting himself that much. He's saying in a very measured way, like, please give me the tweezers.
I'd like to do this myself.
Please do not do that. Like, it's so polite.
He is panicking, but like he's not then lashing out and everything. Like, he is resigned.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking about David Bowie, the actor, I mean, I think you mentioned already, Madeline, that this is his film debut.
Yeah.
Much like Alana Hayam in Licorice Pizza. But then, Alana Hayam is still young. And as of this recording, it hasn't come out publicly yet, but she's in the next Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another. But then Bowie, we know the rest of his career. And I feel like a relevant question to ask here is, what other movies have you all seen him in?
I've seen him in The Prestige.
That was the first thing I saw him in, too, where he plays Nikola Tesla.
And it's like, you don't know what's coming. And then you're like, David Bowie. Of course he's Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
That's an exciting cameo.
And Christopher Nolan cast him in that because of his role in this film.
Really?
Even though he had much more to do in the meantime. I think this was the main reason for that casting.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen Labyrinth.
I have not
That's
seen
the
that
big
yet.
one.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I've seen parts of Labyrinth. I've not watched it beginning to end, but I get the gist.
Madeline, I know you and I have both seen Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah, over the weekend I rewatched The Missing Pieces, which you get a little bit more of him and that, which is great.
Agent Philip Jeffries.
Yeah.
For a brief but very memorable
Extremely
performance.
memorable. I have his scene on a t-shirt. I think it's dirty. I was gonna wear it today and I couldn't find it in my drawer, so I think it's in my dirty laundry.
Yeah.
I totally forgot this, but he was in Zoolander.
Oh, that's right.
That's
playing
right.
himself.
Yes, definitely.
Which is also just one of the best cameos.
Yeah. Which I think that's like an okay movie, but that's a great moment in it.
Has anybody here seen the show Extras?
Yes. Oh my God.
That is incredible.
That's like one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen.
It's same here. Yeah.
Actually, that might have been like the first time I ever saw David Bowie act.
Yeah.
Was actually a past guest on this show. My cousin Sylvie showed that scene to me when I was like 13. And like we were just listening to a bunch of Bowie songs and she was like, oh, have you ever seen his episode of Extras? And played that clip. And like, say what you will about Ricky Gervais in present times, but like him being the butt of the joke in that, it's priceless.
Oh no, it's incredible. I think it might actually be my favorite David Bowie performance on any type of film.
And I think
it's hilarious.
Like something that comes up in that is relevant to mention in regards to The Man Who Fell to Earth is that as big a figure as Bowie was and still is, that, there is kind of this quietness about him too.
Definitely.
And you don't have to dig too deep to sense that about him. Another movie that he's in that I really like and saw last year is The Hunger, which is the debut, the directorial debut of Tony Scott.
Yep.
Which is a vampire movie, but it really feels like a revisionist vampire movie.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
But Bowie in that movie too, it's like, well, you think Bowie is a vampire, you kind of can imagine what the vibe would be, but he's even like without spoiling it, he's more soft spoken than you expect.
Definitely.
Much like Bowie is an alien.
Yeah.
For me, my experience watching Bowie, what I felt worked for him, honestly, was the blankness.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like floating through the world type energy. And I actually feel like he works best in this movie when he is more blank.
Yeah.
And I would say that, honestly, if you think about all of the pictures that you have of Bowie in your head, very few of them are really of him like smiling, I feel.
Only when he's older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly. After
interestingly.
he's already had an established career, has already worked through, I think, a lot of what he's still in when we're talking about, the man who fell to earth. And to me, like, I think that blankness is actually something that really helped him
Yeah.
in his early career, because I feel like there's a lot of like androgyny going on with him too. And I feel like the person who's taking him in is able to make their own inferences about like what's
Yeah.
going on with this guy. And I think the more blank you are, the more oddly accessible you become to people,
Totally.
because people start to make their own inferences about what's this guy's deal. And oftentimes when you create it yourself, you have a stronger attachment to that conclusion.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
he said of this movie, my one snapshot memory of that film is not having to act. Just being me was perfectly adequate for the role. I wasn't of this earth at that particular time.
Aw.
Very cool.
And
I
to
like
set
that.
this more in
Very
like the
honest.
time of his life, that he is, as this movie is being filmed, coming out of a pretty notorious part of his career.
Yeah.
He had been in cocaine psychosis right before then. I think he was still kind of in it as the movie was filming.
Yeah. I think
There's a strong
he
argument in
has
that.
Yeah.
spoken about that as
Yeah.
well.
There's conflicting accounts of what he was like on set, because he said that he could barely remember making a lot of it, that he was kind of just floating around what was going on. But then Candy Clark had some very fond memories of him as an on-set presence.
I'm sure he was perfectly pleasant.
Yeah.
But I definitely would err on the side of his memories rather than her interpretation. Like
Mhm.
if he's saying, I was high the entire time this movie was being made,
Yeah.
her saying like, oh, well, I don't think so, like doesn't hold much water for me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like he could have been like not an asshole, which is great.
Yeah.
But he could have also still been like very on edge or just like a bit shaken from the cocaine psychosis. I don't actually
Yeah.
know quite when that ended.
Yeah, I feel like it's sometime during 1976. One thing I do feel
Right.
more certain about, though, is that he had cleaned up by the time that Low came out, which is 1 year later.
Yeah.
Like the whole Berlin trilogy, I think, emerged from a period of detox for him. Like, are any of you familiar with the 33 1/3 book series?
Yeah, of course.
There-
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because there's a great book about Low, the album, that where I read some of that in, and some people are a little fuzzy on the exact timeline, but I feel like The Man Who Fell to Earth is kind of like the transition point between the worst of that phase and then the cleaning up.
Yeah, that
Cool.
definitely seems to be true.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like that the film deals with addiction and vice in general in
Yeah.
a very interesting way.
Totally.
I mean, gin and tonic is a pretty easy drink to fake for a production because it looks
Yeah.
like water.
Like water.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I noticed the commentary on climate change kind of once the flashbacks to the home world really began, with like the try to remember montage and the fact that there are horses on this planet and these lush green fields, and then fades into the paintings. And there's a whole other thing I could talk about with the artwork. But yeah, it feels like a wider commentary on American exceptionalism, the corrupting nature of success under capitalism, and climate change, and how these are all interwoven. I think while it's subtle at some points and explicit at others, the lack of ethics under capitalism paired with an earnest conservationist, or I guess in Tommy's case, extractive motive is a clear running theme. Like he even says his corporation is all about fuel conservation, but then it was cameras, but then it was also like about owning gas stations. So how much are they actually conserving? Like it's a bit confusing. And so my question is, do we think the film should have been more explicit about its climate change warnings, or is it adequately subtle to balance the many other elements of the plot? Because as we've kind of been alluding to, this film is trying to do everything.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And this was one of the kind of bits where my dad and I butted heads, where my dad was like, I'm glad it's subtle. And I'm like, I feel like it should have been more explicit because look at the situation we're in. But then I kind of made a note to myself of like, one film wasn't going to change consciousness. But yeah.
Like, my thought is that I don't think that that's what this movie is like setting out to do.
Yeah.
I think that there is a different version of this movie that spends a lot more time on his home planet and gives us more details, even if vague, in these weird, like, intercut scenes with what actually was happening there. And maybe he can even bring that to Earth as well. Not just, I'm trying to take resources back to my planet to save my planet, but also I want to come to Earth and warn you about, like, give you knowledge of what we did wrong. But also their climate is probably very different. So it's like, we don't exactly know what happened over there.
That's a good point.
I think this movie, as you said, is trying to do a little bit of everything. And so I think that they just could not, in the way that they chose to tell this story, spend too much time on this particular theme, which I think wasn't necessarily what they wanted people to take away.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that the movie is on some level a character portrait first.
Yeah.
And that like a lot of the commentary that happens within is kind of the background, but still a very like integral part of how this all plays out. But like what really is looming large in my mind right now is this sense that the character of Thomas Jerome Newton, that he is coming to Earth to find means to an end for his own planet. And that like he is adapting to the system of Earth. It doesn't mean that the character has to like what's going on. He's just, it's more of a effort to, even if he ends up in a very, very luxurious position, to survive, to get a means to an end, to get something that he wants. So I think there is a little bit of a detachedness, or more than a little bit, there's a detachedness in his character, which he admits to in the final scene where he says that we would probably have done the same thing to your people had you come to our planet.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that means that this character is manipulative, but maybe he's, you know, when he says that about his own planet, maybe he's not thinking of himself. Maybe he's thinking of the nature of those who surround him. I think, you know, something that I would say the movie succeeds in portraying is that just because you are part of a system does not mean you have to like it or agree with what it is promoting. I never got the sense that the character of Newton, that he wants to like glorify the capitalist world that he's a part of.
No, he's just kind of there.
He's floating through it.
But he's benefiting.
It's true.
I actually think your point about the ethics of success under capitalism, I think that's a really interesting point of this film, because I don't think you can say like, oh, well, he's just there. Like, he has actively invested in these technologies, some of which are actively harmful to this planet that he has come to. Very early on, when he talks to Farnsworth, and Farnsworth tells him like, you'll make 300 million, and he said, I need more, and Farnsworth says, what the hell for?
Yeah.
I really like that moment.
Me too. Like, he takes it back, but I think it's also like the audience response. You're like, wait, really?
300 million.
Yeah.
Well, and again, you don't know why.
Yeah, to a certain point,
why
that
he
is
needs
like
it.
part of the, you know, raising intrigue around what are his motivations. But this continues through the whole film. Like, he makes his spaceship, and he still has his freaking gas stations. Like,
true.
So I think that he actually has a lot of responsibility that he is trying to turn his back on.
Yeah. And I think that there's that moment when Mary Lou, like, you know, cries in front of the TVs when it's like clear he's gone off the deep end, like he's drinking a lot in the morning, and then he just watches all these TVs at once and turns them up and blocks her out. And it's like, okay, deterioration of a relationship, but then he starts yelling at the TVs like, I need to get out of my head, you're not here. And then he says later in that scene that we all like, in like the rocket ship thing with Bryce, strange thing about television is that it doesn't tell you anything. It shows you everything about life on Earth. So now you understand. Now you understand why he's watching TV is to learn, and he can process all the information at once. But then he's on a kind of sensory overload, because I think in that moment he realizes he's gone too far and lost track of his mission.
Yeah.
Because he's assimilated too much.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
And I think it's sort of like then being a bit in too deep. And I would also caveat it with like, it's not him coming to Earth and learning the ways of humans. He comes to America and learns the ways of, as they say, modern
Americans,
America.
yeah,
They
yeah.
say like, that's modern America later
We're trying
on.
to keep it that way, right?
Trying to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And so it's like, not that he was going to be a revolutionary or anything, but it's more that when people are like, oh, it's just human nature. It's like, no. This is definitely about being caught up in the success and the overwhelm of this success, of this abundance, but at what cost? And in his case, it's losing track of everything that he had come here to do.
Yeah. I really like that too. And this just hit me. He says that he found out about Earth because he got
From the
TV
television.
waves that made it to his planet.
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
interesting that he found out about Earth through TV, but then when he's on Earth, he is only okay with finding out about Earth through TV. Like he's here. He can interact with other people if he
he could
wants.
go outside.
He could
could
go
touch
outside.
grass.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he chooses not to. And it's interesting. It's like maybe he was the wrong guy for the job for that
Yeah,
reason.
because
Like
we don't see anybody on his home planet except his family.
that's true.
We don't know what their society is like. We don't know how many of them there are. We don't know if he has any sort of power or if he is just some guy.
Right.
We also don't know if he chose to go or if he was sent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good point. The other thing that jumped out to me about this movie that I thought was really interesting was the shifting narration. You get narration from Farnsworth, you get it from Mary Lou, you get it from
Yeah.
Bryce, you never get it from him. And that to me is very telling because the reflections, I think that we're getting the most honest assessments of like what is happening in this film are not coming from him. They're coming from the humans that are
Yeah.
interacting with this guy.
Mhm.
Another thing that made me think of the Alien franchise is that this sense that mankind, when they encounter a type of being that they are unfamiliar with, the impulse, maybe not of everyone, but of the dominant power, is to keep it captive so they can study it.
Yeah.
And that comes through later.
Yeah.
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 And
Even
so-
though they seem to, I think, not be doing a particularly good job because based on what Mary Lou and Bryce look like,
Mhm.
by the time Mary Lou is able to visit him, he's been there a while.
Yeah.
Yet we still, after that, is like the scene with the contact lenses. It's like they
Mhm.
still,
Yeah.
after all these years, haven't just done like a scan of his eyes.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
really taking their time.
Yeah, and I feel like that's, if you're going to make a commentary about human nature versus whatever alien race Tommy really is, I think that there's a little less of that compulsion in him to like study the people around him per se. It's more like he exists among them. He learns how to work with them and even to use them. But, he doesn't really have that same kind of fascination to treat them like specimens exactly. And
Yeah,
so then
that's true.
yeah, and I mean, like, returning to, initially you posed the question about climate change. I feel like there is maybe like on the part of the character of Tommy, there is like some sense of just kind of simple propriety in doing this. That, I mean, yes, there's his family to look after, but that there is a little bit of like a dispassion to it that he's like, this just has to be done and I am doing it,
Yeah.
as opposed to doing it with much of an ego per se.
He's not like fighting for it. He's
Yeah.
just sort of following a protocol that seems to have been given to him. But again, we don't know if he was sent. It feels like all this stuff he came with, the money, the ring, the backstory, that all
Passport.
that
Yeah.
all feels prepared. And so then he might be following a protocol of resource extraction, but then the plan just goes completely off the rails and he never goes back. What my dad almost was pointing out is like, it's this sort of look at and appreciate all you have, look at this earth and appreciate like everything you have. And then I was like, yeah, I wish they were a bit more explicit about the climate change element of it all, because this is all we have. But then it's like, was this the right place to even say that? Because I know there were warnings in the 70s, and like we had said about Dune, this was on the mind of the zeitgeist. It's just that it was still not as much of a like politicized thing, and also not as much of an imperative as it is now. Yeah, I think you're right, Madeline, that it wasn't the main goal of the film, but it is kind of there because it's a discussion of resources and water and fuel and the cost of doing it all.
Yeah.
But I think, if it wanted to be more political, it would have been more like Don't Look Up rather than this.
Yeah.
Yes, which is not to be confused with Don't Look Now, Nicolas Roeg's previous film.
Good point. This movie definitely feels like that's one of 4 or 5 things that it's trying to get at, and that the capitalist greed and the corruption that comes from that feels like that's kind of 1A, and then maybe there's like 1B, 1C, and 1D becomes the climate change stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it's all there. I think it's one of the cool things about this movie that if you want to go there, I think there's ample text and subtext to mine through and have a conversation about it and take it as far as you want to go, you know?
Yeah, it hasn't been mentioned yet, but that this story was adapted again just a few years ago as a television series.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm guessing no one here has seen that.
No.
I certainly have not. And I don't really know how that was received. I assume it was pretty good. I know it has Chiwetel Ejiofor in the lead role, who is not Thomas Jerome Newton. He is in the show, but Bill Nighy plays an older version of him. But being that was made just a few years ago, I do wonder if the climate change theme is maybe a little more upfront in that iteration of the story.
Perhaps this show only got 1 season and then it was canceled.
Unfortunate. After seeing this, that could be worth checking out.
And each episode is named after a David Bowie song.
Oh, look at that.
There we go.
Or they have like an Ashes to Ashes or a Ziggy.
Moon Age Daydream, Under Pressure, As the World Falls Down, and then The Man Who Sold the World was episode 10, which was the last one.
Yeah.
Very cool. Do we want to shout out any notable moments or favorite small details?
Well, so
Michaela, you're nodding your head in a big way.
So Bryce is looking at this art book at the beginning.
I know what you're going to say.
It's about the poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the film hovers on this poem
for a long time.
They're like,
it wants you to read it.
Like, read it. And it's not even the entire poem. It's the classic thing that us writers do where we go to a museum and then have to write a poem about it. And so Auden is at Musée de Beaux-Arts, and the whole poem is like observing paintings.
Yeah.
And the stanza about Bruegel's Icarus is like, Icarus falls and everyone just carries on with their day.
Totally.
And it's like, oh, this big monumentous event in like Greek myths and sort of this parable of hubris and this parable of like human innovation, which becomes a theme throughout the whole movie of the company innovated itself to death is sort of what they keep saying at the end. It's like Icarus has fallen to the sky. Everyone carries on with their lives. It's almost like a warning that this mission is futile and that like it's going to just go too far. It's going to get too advanced with no direction. And then he will be a fallen man and never go home. And the world will just carry on around him, which happens.
Totally.
And I was wondering what that poem was going to portend. I didn't expect the ending that we got, but now it all makes sense when I look back on it.
Totally.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
I definitely felt that too.
It's rare that, well, for one thing, that a movie would show a poem like that, but also that it lingers on it long enough for you to actually read it. I really appreciated that too. Not exactly a little detail, but we haven't really said anything yet about Candy Clark's performance as Mary Lou. We've talked a lot about the character, but we haven't spent any extended time on her.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know if I would call her an audience proxy, but like maybe the most sympathetic character in the story.
Definitely.
The arc that she has throughout a lot of it is that, you know, she is, well, the first scene where she meets Thomas Jerome Newton is that she is guiding him through a hotel where he's staying. She works there. And he faints in an elevator and she has to basically revive him.
She thinks she's killed him.
Yeah.
That's
He
true.
does look dead.
He really does. He's bleeding out of his nose and
And
stuff.
his eyes are open.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
and
throwing up.
Vomits this gooey substance into a trash can. But then, you know, they quickly become a couple. And that's another one of those changes in the movie where they don't really show you the arc of it. It kind of just happens. And then, you know, as he makes advances in his career that will bring him closer in theory towards going back to his home planet, she is often left to the side, disregarded. And also, you know, another current of this character is that she is an alcoholic too. So that only exacerbates all the issues at hand.
And she really introduces him to alcohol.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is true. Yeah.
It's the forbidden apple right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with you. She's very sympathetic. I also am wondering, like, what the hell does she see in this guy?
Yeah.
Well, to the point where she like throws a tantrum in Farnsworth's office and is like, I want my Tommy. It's like, look, we've all been there with like someone who's broken our hearts so much that to not see them again or whatever is just like, oh God, I feel all torn up inside. But like she throws a tantrum.
And most of us were not handed checks of millions of dollars.
That's a good point. Yep.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And something that comes up with her character that we've said a bunch already, we're going to get more into this, but we haven't yet, is the way that sex is portrayed in the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Definitely.
Yeah.
We got to get into this.
We have to talk about the sex.
Yeah. There's so much sex in this movie. Madeline, you brought up Don't Look Now.
Yeah.
Has a very consequential sex scene in that movie. It's sex that is intercut with the morning after and getting clothed. It's not like really sexy.
It's kind of sexy.
What
it's
makes
like
it,
emotionally sexy.
What makes it sexy is the interactions that you see with them after, that they're like getting themselves ready, like in front of mirrors.
Yeah.
And that it's this
you
like,
see that kind of intimacy.
Exactly.
In addition to the physical intimacy that's kind of intercut with.
He really carries that over in this movie. I don't think there is any sex scene here that's just sex for the sake of sex. I think kind of first early one that you see is maybe the start of the psychic connection between him and Bryce.
Yeah.
I guess.
Oh, yeah.
He's in like a kabuki kind of
theater of some kind.
While Bryce is having sex, I mean, this is, one of the unsavory things about his character, because he's an academic at the beginning of the movie having sex with a student.
Oh, and he does it over and over. But to me, it's
more
like
than one person.
That felt to me like very much this idea of sex being about power dynamics.
Yeah.
Because that's what's also happening in this kabuki theater. Somebody having dominance over somebody else. And what do you see? That's playing out in the sex scene. The weird, slippery, milky
goo
sex thing that happens there. And it's like Tommy has let himself be his alien form.
Yeah.
And Mary Lou is coming in and like trying to initiate some kind of intimacy with him. And correct me if I'm wrong, what stops it is that his alien gooey self starts to rub off on her.
Yeah, and she gets freaked out by the goo.
Slimy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't get any of that context, and that scene doesn't make any sense if it's not being intercut with the way his alien kind have sex.
Yeah.
And so I know it's weird. It's absolutely weird. But
sense.
I appreciate it. Roeg is really aware that sex is really about other things, like all these other things that are happening around it in real life, and that it needs to be portrayed that way in art too.
Yeah. One thing I liked about one of the initial like sex scenes between Mary Lou and Tommy is like he doesn't even like kiss her normally. He almost looks like he's performing CPR on her. The way he like cups her face, and I was like, that's so interesting and like a nice way of it still being like tender and like she's enjoying it, but he's working out like a puzzle in a way.
Yeah, he definitely feels like he's learning her.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking about how he's not necessarily coming to Earth trying to experiment or like take any like test subjects, but in some ways I feel like she is kind of that for him. To just like allow him to learn the human form. Like he seems just like fascinated with the way that her body is shaped.
And
then when we think about, going back to what you were saying about sex being a way that power is displayed, when you think about the final sex scene between those two, where Tommy has this gun that's been given to him by the company that's holding him hostage, that's loaded with blanks. And before he admits that, I mean, he's holding it up to Mary Lou, and she really thinks that he's about to kill her.
Right.
But then when
even the way that you hear gunshot, like fast cut to black, for a second you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Again, the disorientation.
and then, I mean, Tommy is rendered, in terms of his greater position, he's rendered pretty much powerless by this point in the movie, but that act is, I guess, one last way that he can exert himself as a being of power. And in spite of the fact that he has ostensibly come to Earth for a functional purpose to get back to his home planet, I mean, if you're going to argue that there is like a manipulative streak to that character, I think that scene absolutely justifies that.
That scene is also a huge laugh for me because when I saw the gun and that it was loaded with blanks, to me it was just a metaphor for him not being an actually sexually virile guy.
Because
Yeah.
people-
Like
the-
he's shooting blanks. Like,
Yeah.
and to me, it's like I thought that was hilarious.
It's very ironic given who Bowie is at this point in his life. Too.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that crossover. I feel like in that very scene, he even says, I have dreams of men and women, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
She's
so-
like,
She
"And
finds
then-"
very scandalous.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think very in keeping with Bowie's public persona
Yeah.
outside of the film.
Also, there's this one image that appears, I think, twice in the movie following two of those different sex scenes of just their two faces together in more or less a still image,
Yeah.
which I think that like also kind of goes back to what those of you who have seen Don't Look Now were saying about how Nicolas Roeg portrays relationship dynamics more broadly, that like, you know, they both are like pretty expressionless in that image
Yeah.
too. So it really does feel like, you know, we were saying a bit earlier about how Bowie himself is someone that you can kind of imprint your sense of him onto. And I feel like it's true for both of them when that image comes up. It's interesting that that should be like a punctuation to two different sex scenes as well.
It kind of makes me wonder, like, yeah, what did he see in Mary Lou to keep coming back to her? And it makes you wonder, like, does he love her as much as he can while still thinking about this wife? And I think he loves her enough to build a life with her and to like want to see her again when he's freaking being held hostage. It was also confusing, the whole like she's able to get in, but then neither of them can get out, but then she's able to leave. How does that work?
I was really curious
Yeah.
about that too. And that was awfully convenient for the narrative.
But
Well,
then he can just leave one day because the door is unlatched.
That one is more confusing. I
I-
think she's let in because Bryce has pulled some kind of string.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that like the implication that I sensed from him being able to just exit one day is that the company has kind of lost interest in him.
Yeah, I figured they forgot about him and
yeah.
something else. It felt, again, like Synecdoche in New York of like the world's falling apart around you. You
Yeah.
leave and the apocalypse has basically happened and it's just like, I am going to go now.
Yeah. But I think that like the company's lost interest in him and he's in a certain way free at that point, but also he can't rise to power in the way that he once did because of who they know him to be now.
Mhm.
It is a very qualified victory, if you'd even call it that.
Yeah.
And then he becomes
yeah.
a musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Releases an album.
I was gonna say maybe a unlikely shared universe with our actual universe.
Yeah.
And also that album he releases is not quite Bryce's cup of tea.
That's
Oh,
I
yes.
like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I
So-
don't know if it's really my thing, dog. So one other really fun detail I thought this movie had an incredibly funny diss when Bryce meets Newton in the limo. Bryce tells him, I've been really looking forward to meeting you. And Newton just kind of looks off and he goes, I've thought about you once or twice. It's just like so cold. I love
Yeah.
it.
It was so like, what do I think of her? I don't think of her.
Exactly. Yeah.
That-
I like that one.
That
too.
in like I say this in a loving way that does feel a little bit like, you know, depending on the person speaking to him, something that David Bowie might have said in real life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Ooh.
It makes me think of, I remember actually reading around the time of his death that there were a bunch of little articles that came up on the internet about collaborations that almost happened with him, but that were like Coldplay would come up to him or bands like that would come up and he'd be like, oh, it's not a very good song, is it?
Ha.
Yep.
And thus the
Imagine
collaborations
David Bowie
were
saying
not to
that
be.
to you.
Yeah.
I
That'd
would
be tough.
never,
Never
create
recover.
again. I would never create again.
Yeah. I feel like some of those people would have probably thought, you know what? That's okay. We tried. They respect his opinion.
It's like when
perhaps.
Sondheim walked out of like Be More Chill.
Yeah.
You know, that's a bit of a stamp. I mean, I actually like that musical, but there was one other thing about sex scenes, very briefly going back to, of Bryce's initial sex scene where like it's almost not sex, it's like wrestling, it's very like violent, and he's just like grunting. Bryce's lines for like the first 10 minutes of him being in the film are just grunts.
Yeah.
And like pulling out daddy issues
Oh yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
And well, going to a little detail from a character we haven't mentioned in this segment yet. The first scene with Farnsworth in the movie.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you know, you get the sense, well, there's in a different podcast that I was listening to in preparation, they said something about his glasses.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Coke bottle glasses.
Yes.
If there ever were.
But another like really brief but strange thing that happens in that scene when Tommy is basically making his pitch to Farnsworth is that Farnsworth, he just has this little like spit bubble
Oh
in
yeah.
his
He
mouth at
spits
one
out.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a weird angle. It's from
Yeah.
under him, right?
Yeah.
Looking up.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
like, is that Buck Henry trying to be funny or something?
I have
So
no idea.
I actually
Very
interpreted
weird.
that as like everyone but Bowie, everyone but Tommy looks old, a little gritty. They have less makeup on. They look almost goofy or bizarre to him.
Okay.
This includes Bryce. This includes Farnsworth. And even Mary Lou to a small extent. No one looks as polished or as like blank as Bowie does. Like everyone's got like wrinkles and like receding hairlines, goofy glasses, little weird habits and tics. And he's just very like, that also is a way to make him look more alien. And so I think with like the spit bubble, that was probably part of that, of just like, this is some weird lawyer guy. And can we just talk about what happens to him where he gets thrown out a window?
I love that the window doesn't break the first time.
I like
brutal.
that.
So funny.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
And I think he says sorry to those
Yes.
guys.
And I was very confused because also it like seems to signal that he's gay.
Yeah, like he and his bodyguard
Definitely.
are in some kind of romantic
Trevor.
relationship.
Yeah. And then the conspiracy element of it all is very murky, but I wrote in my notes, Daft Punk has showed up to kill Farnsworth because he's gay. Because these guys have these like glittery gold helmets on.
I'm like, what are
Absolutely.
with these helmets?
Why are they there? Yeah.
This movie.
Put on a ski mask.
Thank you. Yeah.
This movie had some aesthetic impact in certain ways. Like if you go on the Wikipedia, there's a whole section about pop culture references to it. My personal favorite of which is, if the font of the poster of the film looks a little familiar, that's because that is the very same font that was used for the Iron Maiden logo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this movie was released around when that band formed too. So yeah, but then like I have to wonder, it's not mentioned there, but I have to wonder if Daft Punk like saw that image of those two helmets and got some inspiration there.
I would hope.
Perhaps.
Yeah. This is a cult movie enough that I think that is plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ola Hudson designed some of the costumes in this film, and you guys may not know her by name, but she is Slash's mother.
Oh,
Cool.
Get out of here.
Well, one of the pop culture references that comes up in that Wikipedia list is that the video for Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle takes some inspiration from this film.
Yeah, I believe that. I
Yeah.
mean, supposedly she and Bowie actually had a relationship briefly at some point, according to her Wikipedia page. And Slash has spoken about how this was like right after she had divorced his father.
Bowie swooping in a little bit.
Yeah, Bowie
Finger
could have
Slash.
been Slash's stepdad in a different timeline.
What? Oh wow.
That would have been wild. There was one moment that really stuck out to me that was just on a visceral level really hit me. The Bowie character in this movie comes into the bathroom while Mary Lou is taking a bath. And she asks him a question about his wife and what she's like. Did you guys catch that he closes the mirror and there's visible cast members or crew members
didn't notice
in the
Oh,
mirror
wow.
really quickly? But then this is what's crazy is he closes the mirror, and as he's trying to think about how to talk to her, he's looking into the mirror but into the camera lens. It's
That I did
really
notice.
striking.
Yes.
There's something I love about that, like breaking of the fourth wall, that you
Yeah.
see someone in a red shirt and someone in a blue shirt if you freeze frame it quickly enough. I felt it watching. I was like, there are people in this mirror that are not in the reality of the film.
And we've talked in recent episodes about like reflections and mirrors and windows and how it can be really difficult for filming. So it's funny to finally get to this.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
it's like, well, this is what happens when you don't do it quite right.
Right. You know, it makes up for it really quick with
Yeah.
this decision, this acting decision.
Yeah.
To like to look down the barrel of the lens.
And that's why they kept it probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just the way that mirror distorts his face too. I was fascinated both times watching it.
Totally.
Yeah.
One last little detail that I want to shout out, and this is more of a intertextual thing with another film, is that briefly in the final act of the movie, you do get a scene where Newton is lying in bed watching The Third Man.
I
Yeah.
caught that too. I love Third Man.
The Third Man is such a great movie, a true classic. That's a movie that aesthetically is very, very different from this. But I think what was interesting about it, and I think maybe the reason for its inclusion, is that that's a movie on several levels that is about being betrayed by people you consider friends.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, there is both the sense that Newton has been betrayed by the very structures that put him into power, and also within that by Bryce in effect, but also that Mary Lou feels betrayed by Newton.
Yeah.
And so that, there's a couple layers of it there. There are a couple layers of betrayal in the third man too. One thing extending from that I liked is, so the third man has a very distinct score played on a zither. And for, the duration of the scene where that, intercut with a conversation between Mary Lou and Bryce where that's happening, the score of the third man briefly becomes the score of the man who fell to earth.
Yeah.
The third man who fell to earth.
Well, I think
there have been others.
There is something about old films in sci-fi, because we see this in WALL-E with Hello Dolly.
Yeah.
And
good point.
it's almost like looking at this sort of bygone era of like a golden age of like
that.
joy, of promise, of of cinema and of romances. There is something about that. I guess it's like wistful is the mood I get.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel like the interplay between what's on television and what's happening in the reality of the film is really strong.
I thought it was really interesting because I think there are a lot of times when this is really played up after the time jump, after he's been captured. You've got the one where Bryce and Mary Lou are in a bar, and I think there's a TV playing in the bar, or maybe it's something Bowie's watching where he is. But the scene that's happening is directly in reference to what Bryce has done to Bowie, where he's like, I sold him out, like I put him in this situation. And they do this a lot. I was curious as to when they have like 9+ TVs, kind of how they chose what all to fill these screens with. There are definitely the more intentional ones, like the ones we pointed out, but I'm like, some of these others, I'm like, why this?
I mean, the tigers make sense, like the tiger and the lion, and
that all makes sense.
Unlikely shared universe. What do you guys think?
The time has come.
I think
the time has come.
Go wild.
Does anyone want to start?
I can start because I think mine will be easy and the most obvious, possibly. I went with Bowie. By the end of the film, Tommy, I am going to call him this. He seems okay with it. Tommy is free from captivity, but still clearly struggling with addiction and guilt. Although he's given up on the possibility of saving his family and planet, he still feels as though he needs a fresh start away from the Earth that he's come to know. Perhaps a change of time period will be just what he needs. As we know, he does have this weird ability to create time portals, so it seems easy enough to just step through one. With his wealth and skills, he could also probably build a time machine. Gathering materials and building this machine takes no time at all. So he sets the dial for the 1800s or steps through his portal, and he makes his way to New York, where he sets up laboratories to develop a range of exciting new inventions. His testing sites expand to Colorado, where he experiments with wireless electric power, lighting, and perhaps most exciting, cloning. While trying to perfect his cloning machine, he's approached by a magician who is desperate to develop a trick which will give him the upper hand over his rival magician. He advises against the use of his cloning machine because he's not yet been able to determine if the machine creates a clone in place of the original while transporting the original to the separate location, or creates a clone in the separate location and leaves the original unmoved. We don't know. The magician is willing. Exactly. The magician is willing to accept this risk, potentially killing himself night after night in exchange for public adoration. So when Tommy hears of the magician's apparent murder, he knows his tenure in this time period has come to an end. He hires several lookalikes to portray him over the next several decades, and then he hops back through his time portal to try yet again to find a happier place for him.
Ooh, I like this. This is good.
It's The Prestige.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Where Bowie plays Nikola Tesla. In this day and age, if there is any historical figure that I wish could come back as a zombie, is Nikola Tesla, for a very, to exact his revenge on a very specific person who soiled his good name.
Co-opted.
Who I felt significant parallels watching this film.
I definitely felt the same.
And I was like, innovate yourself to death. Let's go.
All right, I'll go next if you guys don't mind.
Go for it.
So when Newton arrives at Oliver Farnworth's home that consequential night, he gets a godfather deal to run World Enterprises. No prying open the gift horse's mouth on this one. And things go great for a little while until the government begins asking questions, making demands, and ultimately pushing World Enterprises out by throwing Farnsworth out the window of his high-rise New York apartment. Took 2 times to do it. but they did it. These shadowy helmeted government operatives
Daft
also got
Punk
rid of Trevor
members.
and his bench press in the same fashion. Justice for Trevor, please. Right?
And the barbell.
And the barbell, all that.
Yeah.
The recently deceased Oliver Farnsworth discovers that there is an afterlife for him, and a pretty pleasant one at that. Mary Lou, a God-fearing woman, will be happy to know this too. His capitalistic desires were not so heinous as to rob him of eternal happiness after all. In fact, his legal know-how and meticulous attention to detail while overseeing World Enterprises and its many divisions catches the attention of Mr. Jordan, the powerful grandfatherly arbiter of the rules that govern this afterlife. Mr. Jordan takes Oliver on as an escort, someone whose job it is to pluck the souls out of folks who are about to die and shepherd them into this next dimension of existence. For a few years, Oliver has a really solid track record and is a quiet yet capable and effective escort for many a soul moving on. But one day he makes the grave error of retrieving the soul of a man long before he was actually supposed to die. See, he thought that he was going to die in a bicycle accident. And Oliver retrieves the soul of a man named Joe Pendleton, an aging but optimistic quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams. But Joe's professional athlete reflexes would have prevented him from actually dying in this near accident, which creates quite the issue for Mr. Jordan and Joe, who was about to have one last chance at football glory. This is American football, not European football, for the UK resident at the table. Mr. Jordan is sympathetic to the mix-up, and with Oliver in tow, suggests a number of alternate bodies for Joe to return to an earthly existence in. After a few rejected options, Oliver realizes that there is one person he can point him to. His brother, Leo Farnsworth, another titan of industry, like his brother Oliver, when he was alive. Because Leo Farnsworth is about to be poisoned and killed by his scheming wife and business partner. Not wanting to see his brother Leo go out like this before he has a chance to repair his reputation as a cold-hearted elite, he recommends to Joe to inhabit his body. And who knows? Maybe even turn back the clock a bit and live out his dreams of winning a Super Bowl title.
Is this Heaven Can Wait?
This is Heaven Can Wait.
I haven't seen it, but I sensed it.
I think I'd seen it on a bus once.
Yeah, but this is Buck Henry, who plays Oliver Farnsworth. Warren Beatty inhabits the body of a Leo Farnsworth.
Yes.
I think there's some connection.
Has to be intentional.
I think so, because Men Who Fell to Earth came out a couple of years before Heaven Can Wait, and I want to believe that Buck Henry slid that in there a little bit.
Yeah, so maybe this is a more likely shared universe.
Possibly, I don't know.
Yeah. May I go next?
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think it's your turn.
All right. So, turning our attention to a different character, it's clear in The Man Who Fell to Earth that Nathan Bryce, even if you think he has some redeeming qualities, he is an opportunist, one who's willing to step on other people for his own gain. And let's say that his first brush with this narcissistic trip occurred around 20 years before the film's events, when a highly influential mattress spokesman turned political operative had his manipulative sentiments exposed on the air, and Bryce was the first person in line to take his place. Now, it quickly became clear that Bryce did not have the lasting charisma to continue bearing this mantle, and as he was dropped by the mattress company and left to find work once again, he moved back home to California, let's say he's from there, and began coaching aspiring players in a widely disregarded professional sport, and assuming the stage name Patches O'Houlihan to turn eyes away from his past career misfortune. After this, too, reached a lull over time, Bryce then turned to academia, and the phases of his life that we see in The Man Who Fell to Earth then occurred. But following said phases, let's say the injustices of the corporation of which Bryce has become a part come to light, and he and all of his colleagues are forced to resign in disgrace. And not long after, Bryce loses the use of his legs in a freak accident. Left with reduced mobility and a scarlet letter on his given name, Bryce realizes it's time for Patches O'Houlihan to return. And he begins scouting out up-and-coming teams to coach before a chance sighting at a bar leads him to become basically the Obi-Wan Kenobi to a group of so-called average Joes. And while sometimes resorting to abusive methods in coaching them, including assaulting them with a certain type of hardware, Patches O'Houlihan eventually leads Average Joe's gym to victory in a championship of their conventionally overlooked sport.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Dodgeball. That he's in that.
He's Patches O'Houlihan.
He's the coach.
Yeah.
But this was a twofold unlikely shared universe.
I know the other one, which is. Do you know the other one?
No, actually, I don't think so.
The mattress company.
No,
one?
that did not help.
A Face in the Crowd.
A Face in the Crowd.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
He
okay.
appears for one shot in that movie. He is like during that montage when Lonesome Rhodes is like in the elevators going down and Lonesome Rhodes is in it. He is the guy that I think that the agent is speaking to for him to be the next in line.
Manager. The manager's like, I got somebody else who can fill in.
Right.
I'm just a country
I had
boy.
no memory of that.
Yeah.
That was Rip Torn when he must have been in his 20s.
I got to say, you left out the really obvious one.
Men in Black? Or
Yeah.
So, I was kind of thinking you might do Men in Black.
That one is right there for the taking.
I think I watched it as a kid. I do not have a very strong memory of that movie.
Yeah, well, Rip Torn plays Zed, right? I think he's the leader. He's the guy who runs the Men in Black organization.
Totally.
And it's perfect. It's the guy who runs an organization that keeps track of aliens on Earth.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
To me, it's like that's perfect.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So I'm quite proud of this.
No, this one's good.
No,
this
that
one's
was
good.
great.
That's a movie that, like, I'm sure in some ways it has not aged well, but some things about it are still pretty golden.
Dodgeball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it quite recently on vacation with some friends. We do like an annual vacation. A lot of it is just us watching movies. And yeah, there were definitely a few parts I was like, ooh, but like not enough to ruin the movie.
Yeah.
Like it still holds up. Even the like bisexual joke at the end, which I bet was like a wow moment in like 2006 or whatever, is now like, it's still kind of just a silly thing that they throw in at the end.
Comedies are like that. I feel like depending on the context and when things come out,
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, Rip Torn being in that movie, and when you look at his career in general, he's like a type of actor that I feel like doesn't exist much anymore, where he's like the kind of guy who was nominated for an Oscar at one point in his career, but was still willing to do really silly things like that. And I don't know for sure, but it seemed like he was just game for whatever. And I feel like when you look at older generations of actors, especially like one of my roommates has just been watching a bunch of the Star Wars movies. When you look at people like Ian McDiarmid or Alec Guinness or Christopher Lee, that they balance camp and more like sincere emotions in a really interesting way that I feel like very few actors do anymore. And I feel like Rip Torn is one of those people too.
Yeah, I like seeing like Michael Fassbender do something like Frank, and then the Apple movie, the Steve Jobs movie, and then Kneecap. It's like he seems to have the privilege and have proven himself enough to just do what he wants, to both enjoy himself but also like take on very like serious roles.
I think another modern actor like that is Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
Where even if like his resume looks a little different, I feel like he still is, willing to take the swing in either direction.
Definitely. That was Unlikely Shared Universe. That was a lot of fun. Do we have any last things we want to say about the man who fell to Earth?
So we said a lot before about how the second viewing helps of this movie, but I really felt after that second viewing, I really felt that I could confirm to myself that this is a deservingly praised movie. I'm a big fan. I look forward to watching it again at a future point. And given, the acclamation I've gotten to the style of Nicolas Roeg by watching this, I'm excited to watch other movies of his too.
I kind of feel the same, that I should watch it again, but that I would like to see all of David Bowie's films. So Labyrinth has been on the list since college, and everyone talking about how it was their sexual awakening. And you'd go into someone's room and there was a Labyrinth poster and someone was like, I discovered myself in this movie.
with David Bowie or Jennifer Connelly? Like,
little column A, little column B.
There we go.
And then I think, any other things that he's been in, but I think that's the main other Bowie film I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I wonder if it will be a bit more straightforward than this one. But that's not to say I wouldn't revisit this. I definitely would.
One other one that I've heard good things about is Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah, I think that's next on my list.
Yeah, which came, I think that was between The Hunger and Labyrinth, which is all like post the Let's Dance album.
Cool.
Yeah, that part of the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed rewatching it. I think I'm like you, Emilio, you mentioned up top that I don't know that I'm going to revisit this one super soon. I think I would need to take like quite a lot of time away from this movie to want to take the time to dive back into it. But I found it incredibly interesting, particularly the second time around. And I'm really glad we watched it.
Yeah. I feel the same. I'm glad I watched this movie. But like I said at the top, I am not really drawn to seeing this movie again. I feel like I got a lot out of it watching it. I feel like I got a lot out of talking about it. I don't know, like, good movie. I would recommend watching it because I do feel like this is a movie that clearly works for you, Julian, in a way that doesn't really work for me. But that's movies. That's art.
That's movies.
You know? And I feel okay standing on this. I don't see this as quite having the legend status, I think, that other films do.
And Roger Ebert reviewed this with kind of a lukewarm reception at the time, but interestingly revised his review. He initially rated it 2.5 stars. He bumped it up to 3 for a 2011 re-release, and part of his rationale was that adventurous projects like this aren't given the green light anymore.
They definitely aren't.
There is a vibe that this movie has that even great modern films don't exactly recapture. I'm not saying that they should. They should be their own thing. They should be themselves. But I do think that is a mark of distinction for The Man Who Fell to Earth and other films like it.
Absolutely. I think your points are well made. Yeah. Do we want to talk about what we're covering next?
Yeah. So a movie I've wanted to talk about on this podcast since we started it, basically. And at the time, Julian, you hadn't seen it yet. You have since seen it.
Yes.
So this is my suggestion box. I'm very excited that we're going to be talking Moonstruck.
Nice.
This is a movie I really enjoy. This is Dougie's grandma's favorite movie. I will try to get some details from her before our recording.
So she can weigh in?
Yeah, so I can, bring her thoughts on this. So this comes out in 1987, and the, notable musician star in this movie is Cher, also starring Nicolas Cage. So
yes,
I'm super excited for you to see this, Emilio. I think you're going to be really into it.
Yeah,
I don't want to oversell this.
I've made it my whole life and haven't seen it. I feel like I've had many opportunities to, and just for whatever reason hadn't. So this is the time. It's come. Yeah. By next time we talk, I will have seen that movie and we'll all get into it.
Directed by Norman Jewison, by the way.
Yes, that's right. Despite that name, not Jewish.
Okay.
Interestingly,
good to point out. I would have guessed differently were a gun at my head.
I think most people would. But interesting noting that movie is very much about Italian American identity.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
The entire soundtrack is La Boheme, pretty much,
and a certain Dean Martin song.
Yes,
there we go.
Yeah, I take it you've seen that before.
Ages ago. But it's more that when I was getting really into Musetta's Waltz, I started listening to all these different covers from him. I was like, oh, it was in Moonstruck. I was listening to Musetta's Waltz a lot during my senior year of college for some reason, and just different versions of it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's in Moonstruck. But yeah, there's also That's Amore in it.
Yes.
Cool. Michaela, thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Do you have anything that you want to plug while you're here?
Yes. I don't have any drag shows coming up in New York. I performed in 2 while I was here, but if you'd like to follow all my drag nuisance antics over in the UK, my handle on Instagram is at Jill and Jeff 11. So it's Jill, the letter N, Jeff 11, all one word lowercase. If drag isn't your thing, but you like creative writing, or as I like to call them, insomni thoughts, because I like this podcast, I stay up a bit too late doing writing or other things, then you can check out my Instagram at MNBAwriter, which is all one word again. And there's a website linked to that where I have like a blog where I post thoughts on writing and rejection and sometimes book reviews, but I'm not like a bookstagrammer. Like I'm mostly just talking about a book that I've read for like research purposes for a novel, and I'm like, oh, I found this interesting. That's about it. If you are Oxford based, and if Oxford DIY Pride has already happened by the time this comes out, then still check out our Instagram and our website, because we'll probably host it again next year. But I am a co-organizer of the DIY Pride in Oxford, because we wanted to do a non-corporate pride.
Cool.
Sweet.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In addition to this podcast, you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can contact us via email or at those socials to answer our question from earlier. What is a film that you thought of that you had to rewatch to really take it in the second time? We would love to hear your thoughts on that. Write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. If you're on Letterboxd, you can follow me at Patroness of Cats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. If you're listening to us for the first time, thanks for finding us. Please consider following or subscribing to us wherever you get your podcasts. Or if this is the 4th or 5th or 50th time you've listened to us, thanks for sticking with us. We've really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, to please write a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps. You can also keep it grassroots. You can tell a friend, to tell 3 friends, to tell 25 friends about the Sleepless Cinematic podcast. That helps too.
Well, I think Mr. Newton has had enough to drink.